going on, MMA fans? I'm back to do a response video to Where, When, What's video about whether or not Chuck Liddell is done in MMA. He made some good points in his video, so I want to counter some things. I don't agree, and I will say this off the bat, with the perspective that he used, so I'm going to counter that and talk about some of the things that I'm not necessarily in agreement with on his points. I apologize ahead of time if my voice is real raspy and if I seem a little tired. The World Extreme Fighting event was last night, so I'm a little tired. I've done a lot of video editing today, a lot of things done here around the house that I had to take care of. Spending time with my girlfriend, so, I promised I would do this. I had a little bit of downtime, so I figured I would do it. So Where, When, What was talking about how Chuck should be given another chance because, it seems like he's evolving. It seems like he's improving. And that he made the comparison to Randy and how Randy, has been beaten and people don't count him out. They don't talk about his situations. I think here's the big comparison between the two. And I want to touch on these two because I think this was one of the main points that he made. Let's look at how many times Randy has been significantly, really, really rocked or hurt. The Nog fight, he was hurt a couple times in that fight. And Nog could have finished that fight on a couple of those opportunities. He was hurt pretty good in the Lesnar fight. Both Chuck knockouts that he suffered, and the Barnett TKO. So, Randy has run into some issues with that. However, I think that some of the knockouts that he has suffered, or the TKOs that he's run into, his chin, while it has been questionable and some people have questioned it, he seems to be able to take, what I would consider a significant amount of punishment for the most part, and really hasn't suffered crazy knockouts, with the exception of the really two, the two Chuck knockouts, which were pretty vicious. We go to Chuck Liddell's record, and we can go back to where, I would say it kind of went downhill for Chuck a little bit. And we go back to the first fight that I consider to be the early indication of where Chuck had some issues. And we really wouldn't see it come to fruition until UFC 71, but that was Chuck's first fight against Rampage, and the amount of punishment he took in that fight. We fast forward to UFC 71, Quentin hits him with a right hook, drops him. Chuck is significantly rocked. Rampage knocks him into consciousness, knocks him back out, and then knocks him back into consciousness. The Keith Jardine fight, Chuck was dropped at least one, if not two times in that fight. I can't remember. The Vanderlei fight, he was tagged several times in that fight. One time, I do believe he did get clipped and fell backwards. However, I think a lot of people argued that and said it was a slip. And then we moved to the three knockouts that, without question, were legitimate and vicious. And these were all nasty knockouts. The Rashad Evans KO, the Mauricio Shogun Hua TKO, and the Rich Franklin KO. Now, the difference between these two individuals is that Chuck has taken what I would consider more significant amount of punishment than Randy has. And I think that's where this comes into question. Even if Tito, would have fought Chuck and Chuck beats Tito, that question of Chuck's chin is going to come into play, as well as the amount of punishment he's taken, and can he really get back up to the top? That's the big question here. And more so, again, if you look at just his last 6 fights, the amount of damage he's taken compared to what Randy has taken in his last 6 fights, there's a big difference, a big difference. And I think that's another thing that comes into play. In the long run, is Chuck going to be the Muhammad Ali of our sport? We don't want to see that happen. That's where, I hate this. I don't like siding with Dana White because I don't agree with him on about 85 to 90% of the time what he says. But in this situation, he's right. Chuck shouldn't be fighting. The amount of punishment that he sustained is just And especially the Rich Franklin knockout. That was a baby right hook. It wasn't even a hard hook that Rich threw. It was flush to the chin, baby hook, dropped him, and I mean Chuck was out just from that. So what happens if he gets up against Machida? What happens if he gets up against Shogun again? What happens if he gets up against Rampage again, Rashad again? These are all questions that, do we really want them to be answered? Do we really want Chuck Liddell to be the Muhammad Ali of our sport? That's where you have to start distinguishing things, and I think that's the big issue. One, I don't want to say chin, but it does come down to that, but also the amount of punishment he's taken. Two, I don't think he's ever going to get back to that level. You can evolve and get better and do everything that you want to do, but once you get to a certain point, you can be one of the most talented fighters in the world, and if you take one shot to the jaw, and your jaw isn't what it used to be, shutting the lights on and off, so many times, isn't good. And I think that's what you got to think about here. Really, to be honest, Chuck has shown some improvements in some certain areas. He has shown improvements where he's mixing in his wrestling with his striking, but he's still the same fighter, and he always will be. You can't, me and Carson had this discussion a while ago, and I didn't agree with them at first, and now when I look at it and I really analyze it, we talked about Gomi. Can Gomi retool what he is? Can Gomi retool his striking? No, because ultimately, when Gomi gets into a rough situation, he's going to go back to what he knows, and that's doing what Gomi does, wild striking. He's not very, very technical at times, so Chuck's going to be the same way. Chuck's always going to go for that overhand right, or try to go to the body. He's done it, and he did it in the Shogun fight, where he talked about that back when he fought Rampage. It was a mistake. He still does it. It's something that, you can sit there and practice and practice and practice and work on it in your camp. But when it comes down to a fight and you either get rattled or, as I like to call it, I know Carson's talked about this before, but muscle memory, sometimes you do things that are just, it's inherent, it's built into you from when you first started fighting. And I just think that, number one, Chuck's taken way too much punishment. The 3 knockouts, that's not good. And hopefully, you understand where I'm coming from with this, because when you look at both records, last 6 fights between Randy and Chuck, and I think, at least in my opinion, the question posed answers itself. Chuck can't get back to an elite level. Not at this point in his career, not at this point with the amount of damage that he's taken. And I think the big issue that I have, and even me personally, I don't want to see Chuck Liddell become the Muhammad Ali of MMA. I don't want to see that happen. Yeah, Chuck has cleaned up his life. He has turned his life around, but, unfortunately, I don't want to say it's a little too late, but it kind of is. He shouldn't have got into the things that he got into, the reports of the cocaine, whether that's true or not. I'm not going to get into that. We do know that he was involved in alcohol real heavily, which those reports came out and they, became fact, and Chuck even admitted it. So, unfortunately it is what it is. Hopefully, at some point Chuck will realize that at this stage of his career, this is probably the best time to go out, and not only for the best interest of himself, but, I think his legacy as well. Chuck will always go down as one of the best strikers in mixed martial arts, but I think there comes a point where you have to realize that you got to hang him up, and I think this is the time. So those are my thoughts on it. Appreciate it, where, when, what, for the opportunity to do the response, and I'll be back later this week to do a couple videos and some prediction videos as well, so you guys take it easy.